In a seismic shift in North American economic relations, the United States finds itself in an unprecedented economic showdown with Canada, facing consequences beyond initial expectations. What began as aggressive U.S. tariffs has evolved into a $155 billion Canadian counteroffensive that's sending shockwaves through American industries. This isn't your grandfather's trade dispute, says Dr. Robert Henderson, senior economist at the Global Trade Institute. We're witnessing a fundamental shift in North American economic power dynamics. The U.S. administration's miscalculation mirrors strategic errors seen in other international conflicts. The assumption that Canada would simply fold under economic pressure has proved catastrophically wrong. Canada's response has been calculated and devastating. Rather than backing down, our northern neighbor has launched a sophisticated economic offensive, resulting in factory closures across the U.S., rising consumer prices, and widespread job losses. The strategy has exposed vulnerabilities in the American economic framework that few predicted. Internal divisions within the United States are deepening as different states feel varying degrees of pain from Canada's retaliation. Most concerning for Washington is the potential long-term shift in North American power dynamics. Canada's bold stance signals the end of an era where the U.S. could unilaterally dictate economic terms to its neighbors. This conflict bears striking similarities to other international situations, where aggressive economic policies have backfired. In both cases, what began as a show of force has evolved into a costly miscalculation. As we delve deeper into the crisis, it's becoming clear that the United States has trapped itself in an economic quagmire of its own making. The question now isn't just about how this trade war will end, but whether it marks a permanent shift in North American economic relations. Stay tuned for more updates on this developing story. In a dramatic escalation of North American trade tensions, Canada's response to U.S. tariffs has demonstrated unprecedented strategic aggression, marking a shift in the traditionally amicable relationship between these allies. The Canadian government's massive $155 billion retaliatory package has sent shockwaves through Washington and Wall Street. Initial analysis suggested the U.S. had miscalculated Canada's resolve. Canada launched a calculated economic counteroffensive targeting America's most vulnerable sectors. The first phase, involving $30 billion in tariffs, was designed to impact key U.S. industries efficiently. Unlike the broad approach taken by the U.S., Canadian officials carefully selected targets to create both economic and political pressure. The automotive sector, agricultural industries, and high-tech companies found themselves directly in the crosshairs of these measures. Most concerning for U.S. policymakers is that this $30 billion represents merely the opening move. With an additional $125 billion in tariffs waiting, Canada has made it clear this economic confrontation isn't over. The impact has been substantial on both sides. Canada has absorbed losses of $2.1 billion and job losses across sectors. The automotive industry has faced disruptions as supply chain complications and increased costs hamper production. The U.S. economy appears to be bearing a heavier burden. The targeted Canadian response has disrupted not just direct trade, but entire supply chain networks. American manufacturers face increased costs, while agricultural producers encounter shrinking market access. This situation mirrors similar trade disputes globally, showing how economic warfare between trading partners often leads to unintended consequences. The interconnected nature of modern commerce means trade wars rarely have clear winners. The economic pressure has begun to translate into political tension within the U.S., as affected industries lobby for resolution. This suggests Canada's approach of targeting politically sensitive sectors may be achieving its intended effect, forcing U.S. policymakers to reconsider their stance. In a significant escalation of the trade dispute, Canada's latest countermeasure against U.S. tariffs has taken the form of a nationwide travel boycott, sending shockwaves through the American tourism sector. U.S. Travel Association projections indicate this move could cost the American economy $2.1 billion in lost revenue. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's call for Canadians to explore their own country instead of traveling south has resonated strongly. The initiative emphasizes keeping Canadian dollars within their borders, rather than supporting an economy working against Canadian interests. Flight Centre, Canada's largest travel agency, reports a surge in U.S. trip cancellations, with customers redirecting to domestic destinations. This shift particularly threatens states dependent on Canadian tourism. Florida, where Canadians represented 38% of international visitors in 2023, faces a potentially devastating blow. Texas, which benefited from $433 million in Canadian tourist spending last year, is bracing for losses. California, Nevada, and New York are also vulnerable. If Canadian tourism drops by 10%, it would mean 2 million fewer visits to the U.S., putting over 140,000 American jobs at risk. This threat is significant considering that Canadian visitors spent $2.5 billion in the U.S. last year, outspending all other nations. The boycott's effectiveness is amplified by Trudeau's message of economic patriotism, which has united Canadians to support their domestic economy. As this economic warfare intensifies, the U.S. tourism industry finds itself caught in the crossfire of what began as a tariff dispute, but has evolved into a broader economic confrontation. The situation highlights how targeted responses can have far-reaching consequences. As summer approaches, traditionally a peak season for cross-border tourism, the full impact of this boycott will become more apparent. Good evening. I'm bringing you the latest developments in the escalating trade war between the United States and Canada, where American industries face severe economic consequences from what analysts call a miscalculated strategy. The situation has become dire as Canada's $155 billion counteroffensive impacts key U.S. sectors. A new study from the Brookings Institution reveals that over 400,000 American jobs hang in the balance, affecting workers across multiple industries. The automotive sector, agriculture, and alcohol production bear the brunt of this economic standoff. U.S. manufacturers, grappling with increased raw material costs and supply chain disruptions, face what experts describe as a perfect storm of challenges. The White House has been forced to acknowledge rising consumer prices. American families feel the impact at grocery stores and car dealerships, with costs increasing across the board. Opposite to what the administration's strategy intended, the Canadian response has been calculated, targeting vulnerable U.S. industries while strengthening their own economic position. Their approach includes diversifying trade partnerships and bolstering domestic industries, creating a shield and sword strategy. Tourism revenue has taken a hard hit as Canadian travelers, traditionally a significant source of U.S. tourism dollars, choose alternative destinations. Experts estimate the boycott could result in billions in lost revenue. The situation recalls other international trade disputes, similar to the Soviet Republic's economic challenges. However, this North American trade war presents unique challenges due to the integrated nature of the U.S.-Canadian economy. As pressure mounts, calls for diplomatic resolution grow louder. Canadian officials maintain their position until the U.S. reconsiders its tariff strategy. This standoff continues to reshape the North American economic landscape, with long-lasting implications. In a dramatic turn of events shaking North American trade relations, what began as an assertive U.S. policy has transformed into a self-inflicted economic wound. The White House's aggressive tariff strategy against Canada, designed to demonstrate American economic strength, has backfired spectacularly, damaging U.S. businesses and workers. Canadian authorities have launched a precise $155 billion counterattack, targeting crucial American industries. The impact has been severe in key electoral battlegrounds, Florida, Texas, and New York, where Republican lawmakers face pressure from business constituencies. With the 2024 election approaching, President Trump faces a critical decision. The administration must either change course or risk watching its economic policies unravel, potentially undermining the president's political future. The Canadian travel boycott has hit the U.S. tourism industry hard. This retaliation strategy shows how modern trade wars can escalate beyond tariff exchanges to impact broader economic relationships. Industry experts compare this to other international trade disputes, noting that when major trading partners like Canada retaliate, the consequences often exceed initial projections. The situation mirrors other global trade conflicts, where assertive policies meant to show strength revealed vulnerabilities instead. The key question remains: will the White House recalibrate before the economic damage becomes irreversible? The coming weeks will be crucial in determining the trajectory of this dispute and its impact on North American economic relations. For comprehensive coverage of this evolving situation and other major global developments, subscribe to our channel. Your engagement helps us deliver detailed analysis of these critical international events. We'll keep you updated as this story unfolds.